Now, this is our second Kaladin in a wagon chapter.
I know these are your
And in this
favorite.
chapter, yeah, this one wasn't as bad. I say wasn't as bad. This one was more engaging, I think, than the previous one.
Mm.
In way of summary, we open with Kaladin being dramatic and moody and mopey. Scylla's like, Kaladin, the others cry. Why don't you cry? And he's like, because it wouldn't do any good to cry. She's like, Kaladin, why do humans cry? And he's like, you should ask the Almighty, little Spren, because I sure as heck can't tell you. And that just goes on for a little bit.
That was a very good Kaladin
and then
impression.
And then he's like, I don't think that's how he probably sounds, but that's how he is trying to sound. If they had cigarettes in Alethkar, he'd be
taking
smoking
long,
one right
long
now.
draws of them.
He'd be staring off into the sunset underneath his cowboy hat. And then he thinks a couple times, like, oh, why aren't they slopping us like hogs right now? It's afternoon. That's the time they slop us like hogs.
He doesn't realize it, but he has gotten the headspace of a cat, where if you don't feed them exactly on time, then the world is ending.
Exactly. It's kind of the only thing that happens during the day, so I understand. And then Tavlakov, the slaver, he's looking all over his map, trying to figure out where they are. He's like, hey, Kaladin, you know where we are, you Alethi, because he's real racist like that, assuming that the Alethi, know where the Shattered Plains are. And Kaladin's like, yeah, sure, let me see. And then as soon as the map is within gripping distance, he grabs it, rips it up, and is like, yeah, I guess we're both pretty lost now. And then we see a kind of an interesting character dimension to Vlokov. Brando wants us to be mildly sympathetic to him here. He gives us Kaladin's point of view, thinking, oh, this guy probably doesn't want to be a slaver. He's probably just, terribly poor, and slaving is the only thing that he can do because he can't make it as a proper merchant. And we see that Tavlakov doesn't really get angry. He doesn't act bullyishly when his slaves don't do what he wants. Sure, he'll execute a guy for having a mild cold.
Hey, he was coughing.
On the off chance that he was coughing, to be fair. But he doesn't lash out and try to punish Kaladin for ruining everything. Being rebellious. And granted, he's like, oh yeah, I didn't even care about that map anyway.
He did tell the couple.
It was a terrible map.
He did tell his couple armed boys to go and beat Kaladin, and with Kaladin
and
being
then they didn't, and then he's like, whatever.
The friggin' angsty superhuman. Well, he's not really superhuman, but he is the best boy. Both of the paid mercenaries with big clubs looked at Tavlakov and were like, we're not going near this guy. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I suppose I saw that as more of kind of showing.
Come on,
kind of showing the other slaves what's gonna.
Yeah,
you gotta save some face by punishing the guy who acts out. But there's no there.
He doesn't.
He's
berate
not doing
Kaladin.
it to be a bully.
Yeah, he doesn't berate Kaladin verbally for destroying the map. Either way,
when Kaladin's talking back at him, he's just kind of annoyed, and that's whatever. It's kind of whatever. Yeah. Given the depth of the sailors that we saw on the Wind's Pleasure, Tavlakov is clearly designed to be a slightly deeper character. The only thing that I really see of anything worth commenting on in that area is we kind of have some witty banter between the two of them in a similar way to how we have supposedly witty banter between Shallan and the sailors, but the sailors are in the role of being delighted and flabbergasted at what Shallan says, while Tavlakov is really playing the straight man to Kaladin.
Yeah.
And I think that makes this conversation work a lot better. I think having him be outraged and taking the bait of what Kaladin says, I think would be the equivalent of what we saw in the other chapter, and I'm glad that's not the case here. And I think when Kaladin thinks to himself, like, "Oh, this guy's a likable bastard," I I kind of almost wonder if that's maybe Brandon falling for his own writing a little bit, because I don't necessarily think it. I find it really hard to believe Kaladin would find this guy likable just because of those qualities that we're seeing, but
just because they had like a halfway
just because he's being a little reasonable.
Yeah. Kaladin leans back in his friggin'
He's like,
cage, and he's
that just means it hurts more when you not hurts. It just means you feel a little bit more regret when you gotta kill him.
And it's like, okay, buddy.
Yeah, okay, Kaladin.
Turn the sepia filter down. Put your frickin' shoes on. Touch some grass. It's gonna be okay.
And then we see I think our first high storm of the book. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, yeah.
When Kaladin gets rinsed down by the elements.
The big rinse.
And we see there's some windspran hanging around, which is a major element later whenever there's the storm, and we see that it's just such a torrential downpour. And then they're going to the Shattered Plains, and we get a tiny bit of world building. Kaladin's thinking to himself about how that's where all the armies are. He tries to make himself not feel any hope that things could be any better. And they kind of just prepare to go get sold.
Yeah.
We get a little bit of like, oh, they don't carry swords out here, despite how useful they'd be, because in Alethi lands the commoners aren't allowed to wear swords. And
yeah, which is
we get some neat little world building elements.
Which is an interesting point, because even Tvlakov makes mention to Kaladin that they're not in Alethi lands yet, so there's no laws about him abusing slaves.
Yeah.
So but there were a couple of neat little world building points.
Were there
specifically
any that you noticed in particular?
This was a pretty darn straightforward chapter. Not really a whole ton of world building stuff.
We're told that the rock buds will have grain in them once they get ripe.
They will have grain in them. We
got our little bit of insects are part of Kremlings.
And mention of slugs. To be fair, we had some mention of slugs. Always good to see some Terran life forms, if you will, showing up in the story. Excuse me. I did like, thinking about it, I do like Tvlakov's characterization, because he is a Thalen. He's got the eyebrows. He's a traitor. Trader. But he doesn't seem as caricatured as the other Thalens that we kind of generally engage with, especially early on in this book. He has an actual personality. Like he quips pretty well with Kaladin back and forth, and you can, especially listening to the audiobook, you could definitely tell that the narrator does the like quote unquote slurred consonants and vowels thing. He says the phrase like "you see" at the end of most sentences, which is,
he has a lot of verbal text.
Yeah, but it's
in a way I think it works fine.
Yeah, I mean you can imagine, especially a guy who goes around selling slaves, which is like seen as basically, even Tvlakov says, like, other people, they do not like to be friends with traders, with slavers. So we must be friends with each other, you see? And like I could see that that verbal tick being reasonable in his character. Like he's either like trying to work a deal in or something. He's like, yeah, it's a good deal. You see, I'm doing something for you. Or, something like that.
But we see him in, I think maybe because we see him in such a different mode than we see most other Thalen. Because usually when we see a Thalen, it's in the position of them providing a good or service, and somebody from another culture kind of being our viewpoint character.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of being, as we saw with Shallan, they're kind of, your other characters kind of being humored by the Thalen with the understanding that they're going to be trying to get stuff out of you.
Sure.
It's kind of a little eyebrow raising, pun intended, like racial,
Yeah.
ethnic stereotype sort of thing of like,
Well, if you
I
turn it
don't
up
know,
to
this kind of
11,
feels
you'll
like
get the thing you expect.
like what if Brandon was writing a story in the South and like we had a whole bunch of like Creole characters who
Sure.
all acted like very similar to each other and none of them were viewpoint characters. How would that go?
So like Mistborn,
But-
but American South.
Especially Mistborn era too.
Oh, no.
But
Yeah. No, I
Tavlakov
I
is
do
not
agree.
in that position.
Yeah.
There is no real pretension between him and Kaladin. Like he has nothing. He's not trying to act a role to try to get more from Kaladin.
Right.
He knows that even among other Thalen, he would not be
welcomed
necessarily
in. Yeah.
seen as So I think that having that dimension of stripping away a core element of what a lot of these other Thalen characters have helps to add layers to it.
Yeah. No,
ironically.
I'd agree. I'm trying to think of this was a really straightforward chapter, man. Like
Yeah.
almost more
So
straightforward than
yeah.
Shallan's.
So I do have something on that note
Okay.
of him being contrasting the Thalen merchants of
Sure.
the Wind's Pleasure, whose captain's name I can never remember.
Talbeck?
Talbeck, yeah, and I believe so, and Tavlakov. So we have a lot of parallels between Kaladin and Shallan, just the surface level parallels.
Sure.
At the beginning of this book, and kind of, I'll be interested to see them as we continue. So we first see Shallan. She's on a Thalen ship being carried to, oh gosh, every single time I'm going to forget the name of the city state, the titular city of Bells itself. It's
the very same.
not Carbranth.
It is Carbranth.
It is Carbranth? Okay.
Carbranth is the city of bells.
Okay. I always get it mixed up with Queen Fen's city.
Yes. The Thalena.
Yes. So Shallan is coming. She's being brought to Carbranth by the Thalens. And Kaladin is being brought to the Shattered Plains by a different kind of Thalen, who both kind of they're both kind of representing different aspects of their culture. Shallan is seeing this like brighter, more surface level element of the culture, while Kaladin is seeing kind of the darker underbelly. But Kaladin is coming to the Shattered Plains, the place where all the big conflict of war of all of these nations is really coming together, because the other nations are really not doing that much war against each other during this time. This is really kind of a post 9/11 Middle East. We came here seeking vengeance, but actually we're here to take their delicious gem hearts kind of thing going on. But he's coming to where all of the military conflict of the world is really centered at this point, while Shallan is coming to the place where all the academic pursuits of the world really come together in the Palaneum.
Yep.
Well, of course, those are both their two foci. Shallan is the scholar and Kaladin is the warrior. And Kaladin is going to this place where Dalinar, who's going to kind of become his mentor, is seeking honor among the dishonorable. And while Shallan is coming to this place to find her mentor, Yasna, where Yasna is looking for the truth among lies. And of course, there's a big difference there in Kaladin representing the trying to find honor, while Shallan is really representing the lies more than she's representing the truth there. But and of course, Dalinar and Yasna are cousins, so they're sort of I mean, this is a familiar relationship, niece and uncle, whatever. But there's a lot of parallel there in how these two characters are approaching the beginning of their journeys, and they're both going to spend the entirety of this book in those locations. Of course, everything is moving to the Shattered Plains eventually, so Kaladin's not really going to leave. He's going to, at the end of the story, he's going to move from becoming a slave to finding a position of honor, while at the end of the book, Shallan is going to reveal truth and prepare to leave this place of lies, by which I'm referring to everything Taravangian is doing specifically, as well as all the scheming and conniving that just happens in general in this book. But I am kind of grasping for straws, but there are some surface level thematic parallels here.
No, that's a really decent point, and one that I hadn't necessarily thought of before in terms of like story framing and things like that. And we do kind of to mention on that, we see Shallan coming to Kharbranth with the intention of like visually she's looking to be Yasna's ward, right, and to learn from Yasna, but secretly she is there to steal Yasna's Soulcaster, whereas Kaladin is expecting to be an army slave, right? Like he's expecting to essentially be a part of the military.
And that he's going to find no honor at all where he's going.
Correct. But the reality is he's going to be forced into being a bridgeman. And so it's interesting that Shallan has the choice of presenting her intention to be different than what it actually is, whereas Kaladin has that, he's a slave, he has that choice taken away from him. And even like,
but then he exerts his will to try to turn his bridgemen into soldiers, even though that's the third option that wasn't expected or offered to him.
He chose door number 3,
the secret third option.
Stubborn asshole. No, that's interesting, and it will be. I think it will be a good perspective as we get through the next handful of. We're kind of getting the story framed up right now, and in the next couple chapters, I feel like we'll be transitioning a little bit from the frame to starting to fill out, story beats and pictures and things like that. Obviously, it's a big book. The first portion of the book, like quote unquote book 1, in The Way of Kings, can kind of generally be seen as like the setup, just because of how story structure and classic story goes. But I feel like the first handful of chapters that we're going through right now are really the frame, the frame that the rest of the story
we're still just setting up lots and lots of world building details that other things are going to be calling back to. As well as like hinting at future character arcs, that some of which we'll explain or explore in this book, some of which we won't.
I don't think it's this book that Shallan comes across the slavers and recruits them to help her.
No, that's after she crashes, or after the ship breaks apart in the second book. She crashes and she washes ashore and has to find her way back.
I believe she encounters a handful of the slavers that have been moving Kaladin at this point. Is that right?
I believe so.
Okay. So, obviously that's a ways off, but it'll be interesting to see where the story goes. I mean, we know where the story goes. It'll be interesting to talk about where the story goes from here. The only thing that kind of jumped out at me as I was listening through this chapter was right near the end of the chapter. Kaladin is kind of thinking about slave wages because the
Yes,
the rest of the slaves in the
which is
cart.
not something that an American reader might expect to hear in the context
Right.
of slaves.
Yeah. American perspective on
Yeah,
slavery is like you purchase somebody, and then that person is your property from that point. If
yeah.
you
The
pay them, then
chattel slavery,
yeah.
as we had it in the U.S., is different than it's different to how um, Alethi slavery worked. Alethi slavery is more similar to other historical forms
Hmm.
of slavery. Um, Although, as you pointed out when we were talking earlier, there is mention of another kind of slavery. Well, there's a couple kinds of slaves that don't have wages. Can you
Yeah.
mention? Can you talk about
So,
those?
Kaladin and the other slaves are looking. They're seeing the Kolin war camp as they're coming in. The other slaves mention that's the king's family. Did you know that slaves in the king's service live like uh, whatever? Did they live like mid servants? We hear that he pays his
They give them like human rights
yeah.
and everything.
He pays his servants like livable wages, and Kaladin kind of thinks to himself, like, "Ah, oh, slaves and wages. According to Alethi law, slaves must be paid wages. They're paid half
Mm-hmm.
of what a non-slave, non-citizen would make, which is not a whole lot. But there are two kinds there are other slaves that are not paid at all. The first one are ardents, who are like the priests of the religious system here. Ardents, kind of like classic like Hindu
Like
type.
monks,
Yeah, kind of like monks, kind of like well, I mean Hindu monks,
they've
I guess. They
forsaken forsaken everything outside of service to
yeah.
their temple.
Um monk ardents are not allowed to own property, and actually the because of a historical event before this point where ardents and the religious structure tried to take over
A little light
politically.
treason.
Yes, a light treason. Ardents are now owned by the high lords that they serve. They are owned as property, but they
Though it seems, practically speaking, they're
yeah, they're
treated
still
much more like
pretty.
servants.
They're still very
They're given a lot of
independent.
respect.
They're given respect. They're independent, but there is certainly a political
Yeah,
part to it where
it's a lot.
the the ardents have to be careful to like kind of support what their lord's intentions are, and kind of yeah. um
I think there's a lot of intentional parallels to like European monastic
mhm,
orders in like popular perception of
yeah.
like the Middle Ages in how in how um, clergy would relate to
That
the
yeah,
political nobility nearby, even though they're not like
connected to
technically
them,
really
yeah,
under
yeah,
their that authority.
yeah. So that's the
It'd be
ardents.
interesting to see if there's specific things Brandon has written about his coming up with that.
Yeah, I'd be
And that
curious.
there's a third kind of slave that was mentioned
um
here.
so Kaladin thinks about the ardents, where the ardents cannot have possessions, and then almost as an afterthought he goes, well, them and parshmen too. But parshmen are more like animals. They're kept like animals. And then his train of thought moves on, and that jumped out at me a little bit because of how um, dismissive of the
Yeah,
parchment that is. And
even even Kaladin, who's supposed
yes,
to be our justice boy, does not have any regard for. He doesn't really even see
mm,
the the enslaved Parshmen as people,
yeah, it,
which is, of course, in it's much more similar to slavery as it historically existed in the U.S. And they have the added unfortunate quality in Stormlight of all of the Parshmen have very limited intellect for
Reasons.
very plot relevant reasons, and thankfully that stops being the case in a future book, and it's a very poignant subplot. But for now, I don't know. It's pretty unfortunate how it's presented in this book because we don't deal with it, and there isn't really much. I don't think there's much reader promise that this is something we're definitely going to deal with.
Yeah,
Even the Parshendi don't really seem to think much of the Parshmen in the little bit. I think it's really just in the prelude with Zeth, where Zeth is thinking about how the Parshendi don't seem to take any offense to being called Parshmen who can think in the Alethi language.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Parshmen societally are seen as almost like furniture, right? Like
they're essentially seen as animals.
They're
seen pretty much in the same way Chul are.
Yeah, even Kaladin when Hen joins their bridge crew, even Kaladin on a couple of different instances, like turns around and is surprised to see that his Parshman bridgeman is there. Like even Kaladin in his like sergeant's capacity at that point, right? Because he's working on building his bridgemen up into like his quasi soldier crew. Even he gets startled by a Parshman just being there and being a part of the proceedings. But then you get the flip side where the people who own Parshmen like pay relatively a lot of money for a Parshman as a slave as compared to like other slaves. So even though they don't,
because they'll do whatever you tell them to do without rebelling.
Exactly. Which I mean is, dehumanizing to a point. The Parshmen aren't human, but the whole point is that the Parshmen lack, in this book anyway,
it's depersonalizing, certainly.
Yes, that's the word, depersonalizing. But there is still consideration to the Parshmen in order so that they will not like be killed. They'll leave them out in a high storm.
Yeah.
But they make sure that they're fed and taken care of, and if they get sick, then it'll get dealt with.
I mean, like you would a Chul, like you would a horse.
Yeah. So just something kind of interesting.
We'll see more of them as the story goes on. They have a very their species and its history is very interesting. And we'll see a lot more of that as the story goes on.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up for this chapter? I don't think I have anything else.
Trying to think. Kaladin's farmer brain fired exactly 2 neurons when he saw the staging ground right before they see the shattered plains, which is neat. The last time that we necessarily saw Kaladin's farmer brain interpret something in a similar way was during his, when they're looking at the. Actually, no, it wasn't even him. That
wasn't him. That was the point of view character. Of the boy who just joined Kaladin's squad.
So that's interesting.
Who was also a farmer. I mean. And to be fair, Kaladin isn't really a farmer. He was a surgeon. Like, he did some farm work, but, like, his brain was being filled with surgeon stuff because his dad really wanted him to be a surgeon and not a farmer.
Right, yeah, no, that was the point that I was going to make is, like, historically, like, in character, it's interesting that Kaladin makes that observation, but I
Yeah.
mean, he spent his time growing up around a farming community,
Right.
so
He definitely absorbed some of it.
it's not out of the question that he would see verdant land and be like, "Hey, that would make good farmland." But
Mm-hmm.
him as a depresso slavo, almost hitting the Shattered Plains and being like, "Hey, we could grow some crops over there."
Plains, more like Shattered Spirit.
My shattered spirit's almost as broken as Tien's. Oh, Tien, why did you die? Oh, it's a whole thing.
It is a whole thing. Poor boy.
That's kind of all I got, man.